It's Laurie White with the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, back with another edition of Chamber TV. And this is episode number 160. So we are continuing our trek through the world of major issues affecting business leaders today. A lot has changed since when we first started broadcasting Chamber TV back in the early days of COVID. So now we're talking a lot about the trends that are impacting business professionals, employers, employees, folks at all within all industries, about some of the things that they're seeing and the challenges that they're feeling, and what some of the best minds in the industry are prescribing as ways to continue to reinvent their businesses, reimagine their businesses, and truly excel. So today we are talking about the biggest issue affecting everybody, and that's the issue of hiring, workforce recruitment, retention, finding the right fit, the right employees for your business, and all of this about the Great Resignation and folks, really rethinking their lives and, what makes sense for them and their families, and how does that, play into somebody's desire to, stay in the job or look for a new opportunity. So big issue, a really hot issue, and we have a great subject matter expert with us today. He's Chris Caccia, and he is the Director of Enterprise Data and Analytics at the Maxfield Group, great member of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce. And today we're talking about recruiting and retaining and managing employees in the IT, particularly the enterprise space, which arguably is one of the more difficult industries to recruit into and to manage employees. So Chris, hello, how are you today? Thanks for being with us.
Good, Laurie. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So I know you have a fantastic deck that you have prepared for us to go through some of the key issues that you are seeing and your clients are sharing with you. So this is a live presentation. We are live today on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And we have a live audience. So I'm inviting everybody to weigh in as we're listening to Chris and learning from Chris and hearing what he has to share with us. So open to questions, comments, feedback. Want to make sure that we get all your answers out there on the table. This is also being recorded, so we will have an opportunity to push it out later on all of our social media channels in case you want to take another look at it or share it with your colleagues and team members. So with that, Chris, I just want to say how grateful we are to you for being with us today and to taking 60 minutes or so to present some really important information. So I'm going to turn it over to you and maybe ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your business and give us the benefit of your extensive subject matter expertise.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm really excited about doing this. So let me start. I'll give you a little introduction into myself and our company. So I've been doing staffing for 8 years now. Specifically around the enterprise space. That includes ERP, enterprise performance management, so EPM, as well as data and analytics. Mostly on the contract side. We do a lot of permanent placements as well with some of the clients we work with. But really on the contract side is really where we specialize. Maxfield Group, we're located in East Providence, Rhode Island, right on Taunton Ave. We do have a nationwide footprint, so we staff nationwide. We also do some things overseas in the UK, depending on where our relationships take us. And that's really, the areas we sit in for the most part in ERP. We sit heavily around Oracle, SAP, some Workday and NetSuite. And as you get into the EPM side, a lot with a tool called Hyperion, Anaplan. And then on the data analytics side, it's a little more tool agnostic. It's such a big space. There's a lot of overlap. But really those areas of anything around data architecture, data warehousing, data science as well is really our strong suit. So if we want to start the deck perfectly, we introduced Maxfield Group, and we can go on to the first slide, like a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about. The first thing is really the Great Resignation, right? If we want to let me flip to that next slide. There we go. So this is an overview. So the Great Resignation, proactive versus reactive recruiting, right? How to kind of, I guess I'd say, be ahead of the game as the market is moving so fast. How to identify talent, keep talent, and have those fresh resumes coming in the door. We're going to talk about intense hiring demands versus the talent pool. Everyone hears nowadays, there's so many resources out there, there's so many jobs. I think one of the issues we're having, and clients are having, I should say, is getting those folks to stick, right? And what are some of the reasons why we're having trouble with that? Increase in market rates. I know everybody, when they're in the office, not in the office, they're hearing the buzz of maybe how much their skill set is worth out there in the market. And they're kind of getting, a little antsy and they want to see what's out there. How they're leveraging offers when they are interviewing with other companies. The hiring process, I think, is one of the biggest things, right? Being on the agency side, it can get frustrating for both the client and the agency. You've identified a great resource you want to hire. How long do you have until that resource goes elsewhere or takes another job, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and maybe some companies will learn on the internal side, maybe how to move a little quicker or streamline their process. Unrealistic requirements, probably another one of my favorite things. We'll talk about the purple squirrel, right? Everyone wants the purple squirrel to every skill set, and where are they willing, I guess, to budge or flex rather on that skill set. Vaccination mandates, right? One of the biggest issues through COVID that we've encountered. Not only, whether companies are looking for it or not looking for it, but then when you find a resource, everyone's got their own opinion, and politics aside, unfortunately, it is the world we live in, and how are we just going to adapt with it and overcome any of those situations? And then again, we spoke earlier, one of the biggest, remote versus hybrid or on-site. 2 years of going through COVID, there was a lot of remote work happening. Now companies are saying, hey, we're moving back to hybrid or we're moving back to on-site. How is that affecting their workforce after 2 years of people, being at home, taking care of their kids, not having childcare? How are we going to work with that? So the Great Resignation. So this is a term that's been, being thrown around. A statistic that we saw recently was over 4 million employees are quitting their jobs as of February 2022. Reasons for it, right? A lot of things I spoke about, whether it be going back into the office, childcare. They've gotten used to, as I say, 2 years of holding down the fort, working remote. No issues, right? I don't want to say no issues. Mostly no issues, right? Is what these folks say. At what point, what's the reason for them to come back into the office? Like, I've done my job for the last 2 years. Why now do I have to sit in a seat? And again, everyone's got their own opinion on that, but I think that's something that companies kind of need to sit back and look at. Proactive versus reactive recruiting is another big piece. And to dig into this a little bit and how to leverage an agency. So when a company has a job they want to hire for, right, they'll do one of two things. The manager will type up a job position, whether it be, new or an old one, and they're going to give it to their internal HR or their internal talent acquisition. They're then going to take that job. They're going to post it on the job boards, right? Whether it be LinkedIn, Indeed, any job board they have access to. What's happening with that is a couple different things. You're having individuals who are out there looking for jobs that are sending their resumes and applying. Unfortunately, a lot of folks nowadays, due to them being frustrated and looking for jobs, they're submitting their resume to anything and everything that maybe has one skill set they have, the job title they're looking for, you name it. So that's a big issue, because what's happening is you're speaking with managers and they're saying, well, I've seen 200 applicants. We've gotten 200 resumes. We have no short stream of resumes coming in the door, but none of them are worth talking to. None of them fit the skill set I'm looking for. So then you need to sit back and look at it and say, okay, the job description you put out, is it updated? Is it accurate? Because a lot of times there's a disconnect between, the manager and talent acquisition. Nobody's fault. Talent acquisition is not very technical, so they don't understand what the client's or the manager's looking for. And again, the manager is just expecting talent acquisition to know what they're looking for. So at that point, it's, you've spent a month and a half, 2 months, maybe sifting through resumes, and you're saying none are a fit. So what are you going to do? Either you're going to update the job, okay? Because a lot of times, say this job hasn't been open for 2 years and you lost somebody. Skill sets change over 2 years. In IT, things are changing quarter by quarter with new technologies coming out, what companies are implementing. So you might have posted a job that you had 2 years ago, but now it's a completely different skill set that you're looking for. So one of the ways to, I guess I'd say, combat this is proactive recruiting. And the difference is when you work with internal HR talent acquisition, they're doing their job, which is resumes are coming in the door, they're speaking to them, and whether they're a fit or not is whether they're going to send them over to the manager or not. When you're looking for proactive, this is where an agency comes in. We're talking to folks 24/7 with these skill sets, right? Dealing with contractors, maybe who's looking for a permanent job or a change. A lot of these folks that we find are actually folks that aren't out on the job boards. They're not actively applying to jobs, and a couple different reasons. One, there's a fear that, hey, my current employer might find out I'm looking. Rhode Island specifically is a very small area, right? Everyone knows everyone. You submit your resume somewhere, that gets back to your employer. Your now current job is at danger. So what we do is we're speaking to folks that are in companies, reaching out to folks in companies that may be looking for opportunities or that are a fit for that job. And then we're speaking with them confidentially, right? We don't want you to lose your current job. We understand you're looking. You're going to leave your company at some point anyway if you're looking for a job. What can we do to help and make sure we're putting you in the right position to be successful? Next, we have how do you retain current employees? And this is a very, I'd say, difficult conversation to have with clients because there's a lot of different things, right? Through COVID, maybe bonuses weren't paid out and people aren't happy with that. People are hearing, my friend in the same market got $50,000 more for a job, right? I want to start looking now. What's the culture like? I said before we got on this call, right? It's a lot different than a few years ago where it was, I want to go to a place where there's a work-life balance. I can come in at 9, leave at 5:30. Now, unfortunately, it's, is the fridge packed with snacks? Do they have this to offer? Is there other benefits you guys pay for, gym memberships? So that's something that I think companies constantly need to evolve and keep up on things in order to attract good talent. Because at the end of the day, if somebody knows they're good and they're very good at what they do, they're getting calls all the time from recruiters or other companies. So what can you do to ensure that your employees are happy? They're going to stay in their current role and they're not going to leave you during maybe a crucial point during a project or something like that. So intense hiring demands versus talent pool. So through COVID, of course, a lot of individuals will lay off, right? As things started to pick up again, hiring demand started coming back. Companies are kind of scrambling and saying, hey, we need this kind of skill set. We lost so many folks. What's the talent pool look like? So over the last couple of years, a lot of layoffs, and this was happening. Well, a lot of companies were still out there and they put things on hold, but they had new software they were buying. They were doing upgrades, which again creates for a high demand. So where before you maybe had, I'll throw a number out there, maybe 10 clients in Rhode Island doing implementation in Q1, right? A lot of those companies held off their implementations or their upgrades. They're all now hitting at once. So now if you have upgrades happening with rare skill sets, that's that many more clients who have the needs and so many folks in the talent pool, there may not be enough folks. So now you're fighting over talent. Who's going to pay more? How are you going to get it done? At the end of the day, clients are like, well, we still need to implement this tool. What are we going to do? Now it's how many resources have the skills. So a couple different things here. Over those 2 years, people were out of work, maybe not working. They maybe didn't pick up any of those new skills. Again, quarterly skills are changing in the IT space. New tools are coming out. Everyone's trying to rebrand themselves. So if you're looking for someone, you're saying, hey, I want somebody with 3 years experience in this tool, but the tool's only been out for 2 years, half of which people haven't been working. You got to kind of flex on that and say, all right, where am I willing to budge on this skill set? Maybe somebody with a previous skill set that can pick up the new one. We can train them up, or, pay more money for an individual who has a skill set and the high demand and get it done on time. And again, that's a decision that a client needs to make. They need to assess the whole situation. And I think come to a decision. And that brings me to the last point is, are you willing to train, right? If you're looking to pay, and I'm just throwing out numbers here, $100,000 for a skill set that's commanding 150 regularly in the space, what do? Right? I can take a more junior person at $100,000, train them up where they're now going to be worth, say the 150,000, whatever that is. And I keep them happy. They learn a new skill set. They're advancing in their career. The other thing you have to worry about with that, the flip side is once they gain that skill and they realize that that skill commands a lot of money, what's the chance of them leaving you? So it brings us to the next big option of how do we keep them happy? Do we give them raises? Do we give them bonuses? Do we say what we said we were going to do when we hired them? That's one of the biggest things is individuals apply for a job of what they're going to do. And the next thing you know, they're really doing 2 to 3 different jobs than what they were hired for the one to do. Market rates. So this is something that's very interesting. In my 8 years of doing this, I'll be honest, I've seen fluctuations, never to this amount. In the IT space, specifically enterprise, a few years ago, maybe 2016, a lot of things started to go to the cloud. When things went to the cloud, what was happening was not a lot of folks had the skill sets. People were willing to take a pay decrease in order to get the skill set and advance their career. So what was happening was companies got used to, I don't need to pay that much for a resource. I can get them at this number now, right? Well, now that things have evolved, or resources rather, were getting a higher number. Now with COVID, and I wish I could tell you the reason why. I really don't, and I've been trying to figure that out, but numbers have skyrocketed. It's like there's a lot of resources out there who haven't been working, but no matter what, they're still demanding that high pay rate. Perfect example is we had a resource who we got an offer for with one of our clients, and he went to give his resignation, and his current client was like, "We can't lose you. We need you." They gave him a $55,000 raise. Clearly, he turned down our job. No fault to him. I mean, that's something that honestly, if I was him, I wouldn't be able to turn down either. It's kind of weird. If I was that resource, I'd say, well, you're willing to give me the money now. Why weren't you willing to give it to me before? But clearly his company stepped up to the plate and they realized they needed him for that skill set and they paid for it. Now, with that being said, other people in that company probably heard that. They probably found out because word gets around. Now you have to worry, is that company going to give everyone else raises? Are those other folks going to be leaving? It's a very common thing where we're encountering, and companies, some are adapting to it. Some are upping their, salaries and rates, and others that aren't, unfortunately, are sitting around waiting for these resources to fill these roles, and they're very short-staffed. The other thing is resources are getting and this will all tie in when I get into the other slides, and I'll make sure I kind of interlap. But resources are getting multiple offers and then making a decision. So how can you manage this? So you have individuals that, say they're interviewing 3 or 4 different companies. They're getting an offer and they're saying, okay, I'm getting this. Let me interview this other one and see what they're offering me. And, they're doing the pros and cons of each job. And it depends what each individual is looking for. Are they title driven? Are they money driven? It seems like in this market, for some reason, a lot of folks are very money driven. Now, as a company, what can you do to ensure when you make an offer to somebody, you have a better, I guess I'd say, hit rate or chance of hiring that individual? And what I've been telling clients is you need to put in your offer letter basically a timeline. So if the offer is sent out on a Monday, you have until this Friday to give an answer, or 72 hours to give an answer. Because what individuals are doing is they're sitting around, they're playing those offers off of each other, and they're going to other clients, say, well, I'm getting this from this company, I'd like this to come on. And again, they're negotiating, rightfully so. But at the end of the day, like I said, the client fell in love with somebody, they wanted them. If they don't move fast enough or make a decision, they're now back to square one and they're starting all over again. You need to look at it as, how does that affect your team, right? If you expected to take somebody in, you were looking for this position for 3 months, and now you finally identified somebody and they're going to turn down the offer, all that work that was supposed to go on that individual's plate is now getting pushed off onto somebody else on that team. So now you got to look at, am I overworking the team? Right? Are they going to leave? Am I going to have 2 positions open now that I need to fill? So all this really interlaps. The other thing is resources are working remote and still commanding the high salaries. And I think I may have said it earlier when I was live, but you have individuals, in Rhode Island, very small state, right? Individuals say, well, I can go up to Boston and I can make $40,000 more. Well, the argument before was, all right, if you want to do that, you can drive to Boston or get on a train, spend 2 hours commuting a day, if that's what you want to do. Now it's basically like, well, I don't need to do that. I can work remote for a company out of Boston, still make the $40,000 to $50,000 more. So that argument is kind of, gone out the window. So now how are companies going to compete with that? Again, Boston's not that far away. A lot of companies are switching to fully remote or hybrid. So instead of 5 days a week going to the office, maybe 2 or 3 isn't as bad. Um, Gas is through the roof, right? You look at commute and commuting expenses, that also plays into this. So all these pieces fall into, I guess, at the end of the day, salary, what I'm getting paid, and that work-life balance piece. The hiring process. So this is one of the pieces that I really enjoy talking about, because you will get some clients that want you, I guess, to say, educate them, right? What's the issue we're running into? What can we do better? And that's one of the things we always try to, you never want to tell somebody you're doing it wrong, right? But how can you help? Maybe where can you change things where it can up your percentage of landing good resources? So again, talking to resources all day, hey, we say, where are you interviewing? Where have you spoke with individual? Where are you at in that process? The number one complaint we hear from folks, and again, this is more on the permanent side as opposed to the contract side, is resume feedback, right? They'll send their resume, whether they apply online, if it goes into a company portal where then they look at the resumes and see who's a fit, they don't hear back. There's nothing that will put in a bad taste in an individual's mouth than never hearing back, right? Even if it's, hey, listen, you're not a right fit for this role. Maybe we're moving on with another candidate, something just to give them, I don't want to call it closure, but something. That's the number one thing. And a lot of folks say, I applied to that company twice, I never heard back, I'll never apply again. So as a company, your process you want to look at, yes, you're trying to attract talent for those specific roles, but are you turning away folks, good folks, for future roles they may be a better fit for? So that's a very common thing that we see, and a complaint we hear from resources looking for work is they never got feedback. And I think that's something a little different on the agency side. We always try to give feedback because it's our relationship, and we always want to work with that person in the future. And no fault to the client. Sometimes that's not a thought for internal talent acquisition, right? They're kind of, and I hate to use the word tunnel vision, they're saying, hey, we need to fill this role because we have a need. We need to do it as fast as possible. Again, not knocking them for that, but you just got to look at from a big picture. Hey, are we turning away good candidates for future potential roles? The other thing is interview setup, right? So individual applies to a job. Maybe they get reached out to saying, hey, we're going to set up an interview with you. How long does it take to set up that interview? One of the biggest things, and this is where we'll interlap on losing good resources, if you have a resource that is a perfect fit for a role and it took you a week or a week and a half to set up that interview, how many other interviews have they had in that week and a half? How many offers have they had? I just had a client come back to me actually this morning. I gave a resource to them maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and I got him a job 2 weeks ago. They came back, they said, hey, we'd like to interview him now. I said, unfortunately, he's off the market. With the market the way it is, like, these folks are flying fast. So if you're going to get a good resource and identify them, you need to make sure your process moves quickly and efficiently. And when I say quickly and efficiently, I think a lot of that has to do with setting it up and saying from the beginning, hey, we're going to have maybe one round interview with this manager. Then you're going to talk to the team. Then there's going to be a third round. Setting up that expectation so at least they know what to expect goes a long way with the resources, as opposed to we're going to have an interview and, hey, maybe you'll hear from us in a week. Then 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by, you don't hear from them. Again, at this point, they're interviewing with other companies. There's going to be that one company that sees what they like and they're going to pull the trigger fast. So I guess it comes to a competition piece for clients, right? If you want to attract top talent, you need to move fast, identify fast, and kind of streamline that process. And that all ties together with the interview process. Unrealistic requirements. So this is where we joke, and I don't know if it's just within the staffing space, right? The purple squirrel. We'll talk to a manager or a hiring director, and they say, I want this individual to have this skill set, 10 years experience in this, 12 years experience in this. And the joke is, oh, you're looking for the purple squirrel, right? This is a job that maybe has been open for a year. So the first question we ask is, well, why is this open for a year? Maybe they say, hey, it wasn't a top priority. We had some other things we had to handle first, but we kept the job open to make sure we had resumes coming in the door. But a lot of times what it has to do with is it's an unrealistic requirement. This gets into, if you're dealing with a small talent pool, and I'm just going to use Rhode Island as an example. Rhode Island's very small. The skill sets locally are far and few between for certain things, especially in the analytics space. So if you're going to look for someone with every skill set under the sun, and then maybe your salary doesn't line up, we call that a purple squirrel. And that's where we try to educate the client and say, hey, where are you willing to maybe flex on this? And we bring the facts, right? We bring the numbers to the client. There's only 5 individuals in the state that have this skill set. 3 of them are getting paid this amount. 2 are getting this, but they're missing these 2 pieces. Where are you willing to budge and kind of meet us halfway if you really want to fill this role? Sometimes they say, no, we're not willing to flex on it. We really want this skill set. And at that point, of course, it's our job to go find that individual. But if we can't find them, again, how is having that seat open on your team affecting the rest of the team? How's it affecting your projects, right? Are you willing to bring in a contractor while you're looking to find that perfect permanent resource? If it takes you 6 months to find that perfect permanent resource, you're behind the 8 ball. So maybe taking a contractor for 6 months, potentially hire a contractor and bring in a more junior resource, and that contractor can train them up. Yeah, the cost may be a little more, but what's the cost of not having that seat filled for that amount of time? And that's something that companies are starting to look at and understand. And I think those companies that adapt to that are going to be successful, and those that aren't are really going to struggle with fulfilling their projects. Go back one slide. Sorry. Asking for years of experience is another one. I touched on this earlier, right? New tools come out and they say, well, we want somebody with 3 years experience. Well, the tool's only been out for 2, right? And I think that's sometimes education from, our perspective. Sometimes these software sales folks will, sell the world to you, and then you got to go find the folks to do the job. And you're like, this is a lot harder than I thought, right? So I think that's on our end, educating you. And the biggest thing is overlapping skill sets. How many times we talk to folks where they say, well, the job that I applied for isn't the job I'm doing, right? And that's one of those things where, as folks are short staffed, you're going to come in and, hey, we hired you for this job, but we also need you to take on this, this, and this. Next thing, that person's working a 12-hour day, stressed out, no work-life balance, and it's only natural they're going to start looking elsewhere for other jobs. So I think one of those things, everything that needs to align, job requirements, what you're looking for, as well as skill set, is something where companies need to sit down together and have a better understanding or path they're going to take during their hiring process. Vaccination mandates. Now, this is something that's, a very, I guess I say, sticky situation. A lot of folks don't like to talk about, but it's a reality, right? And this is something that, again, 100% politics aside, not taking sides, this is something that has been a very big issue. State by state, it varies, right? Company by company, it varies. Of course, you're going to have people on both sides. Those who don't want to get vaccinated, those who have been vaccinated. Where are you willing to, again, flex as a company in order to make sure you can operate the same? So evaluate how it's going to affect your workforce. I've spoke to folks or clients rather, where they put the, I guess you'd say, mandate or vaccination requirement, and they lose a lot of folks. So now you're not just losing 1 or 2 people due to salary, you're losing 20 individuals due to, personal beliefs. Were you ready for that, right? Did you think that through? How's that going to affect your team? I think the other piece is that we deal with on the contract side. A company will tell us, hey, they need to be vaccinated. Okay, that's fine. When we take that and then we call the individual and we say, hey, they want you to be vaccinated, we've run into a couple issues, right? People tell us that's not legal. You can't ask that. And my stance on that is, hey, either way, for me, it's fine. Like, your stance is your stance. This is what the client's asking, right? And unfortunately, like I said, it's the world we live in. If you're not, no big deal. Some companies say, hey, if they're not, it's not an issue. They just need to get tested weekly to come in. And that's where they're being a little more flexible. Other companies saying, nope, they must be vaccinated or else we can't have them. And again, that is fine. That is the company's choice. One of those companies has also had a job open for a year that they can't fill. We had honestly the perfect resource for that job, but he wasn't vaccinated. And they just said, no, we're not going to hire him. So again, now that next step, okay, this job's been open for a year. You turn down a resource who can do this job with a rare skill set. How does that affect you? Right? Are you willing to go another year without that job being filled because there's no one local? And that was the other piece. They wanted them to be in the office 5 days a week. Um, and again, I use this term all the time. You know, it's a Marine term: adapt, improvise, and overcome. You got to adapt to the situation. Maybe you need to improvise a little, right? What? How can we flex on that? Can we potentially combat the vaccine piece by saying hybrid schedule? If you want to be in the office, great. If you don't. But that's open to everyone, vaccinated or not. So that could be a way to deal with it and overcome the situation. That's something that a company needs to sit down, maybe executives, and figure out where they're at in their business and maybe where they want to be. Um, because I'll be honest, it's evolving constantly, and I think it's going to be evolving still over this next year, especially with the amount of hiring needs and the amount of resources out there that are looking for work. Remote versus hybrid and on-site. So I spoke a little bit about this earlier. COVID happened. A lot of companies said, "Hey, we're going to work remote." These folks worked for the most part. I don't want to speak for everyone, but it was a seamless transition, they'll say, right? I mean, 2 years I worked from home. I worked more than ever. I rolled out of bed, was on the computer an hour earlier than driving into work. Now my company's asking me to come back in, right? I haven't had childcare for 2 years because my kids have been home. Now I got to pay for childcare, and it's people got used to 2 years of working remote, and their lives have changed. Now they kind of got to go back to that way it was. Some of the individuals I spoke to right out of college hired during COVID, they've never been in an office. They were hired remote. Now the client's saying, "Hey, you," or the employer rather, "you need to be in the office now." That's a big difference for somebody who's never done that. I've always been in the office. I have the availability to work remote really when I want. I prefer to be in the office. That's just the way I am. But knowing I have the flexibility is really a life changer. So I think that's some things that companies need to look at is, are you getting more out of your employees or are you getting less? You're always going to have those employees that go above and beyond. I'm the kind of person, if I work from home, I'm on my computer more because I feel like I need to be working, right? I'm not going to the coffee pot and 15 minutes of pouring a coffee and talking, going back to my desk. I'm sitting there and I'm doing things as needed. And I'll even work late. I get caught on my computer sometimes till 6:30 at night, and I don't even know it. So with the technology we have nowadays, whether your employees are working or not, whether they're logged in or not. If they're doing their job, whether it be from 9 to 5 or 7 in the morning till 9 at night, if they're doing their job, I think it comes down to treat individuals like adults. And those that can't do it, either, hey, you get on board, or unfortunately look elsewhere. And I think that's one of the situations we're in now with companies, is they're kind of tottering back and forth. And with all the analytics we have nowadays, you can figure that out and make an educated decision as to what's best for your company. Pros and cons for employers, same thing, right? You're going to get more out of your employees, or maybe less. They're going to be more appreciative, work harder for you. I think that's something very common. And work-life balance is a common thing. So, as you have myself, I have a 2-year-old daughter. My wife works remote. It's a big difference, the fact that you can be home, see your kids grow, right? See them throughout the day. A lot of folks that are in the office working, commuting, whatever it might be, they feel like they're missing out on that. And they see their friends who are potentially working all remote, doing whatever, and there's a little jealousy going on. So now they're starting to look for jobs that are more remote, or maybe 2 days in the office, 3 days from home. So I think that's something that, again, companies need to evaluate and figure out what's best for their model and what works best for their employees. Questions. So again, this is going to be an open floor. Lori, people are gonna send some messages in through Messenger, and I'm happy to answer any questions following up on what I spoke about or elaborate on a little bit more, or any other questions that maybe I didn't cover.
First off, Chris, that was amazing. You touched on all the hot button issues, and I know I was following along with great interest. So, yeah, I'm going to ask folks to put their questions in the chat, and we will get to each and every one of you to make sure that you get your answers. But before we do that, Chris, let me just give you an opportunity to restate your who you work for. So, who is your customer? How can people get in touch with you? if they want to work with you? Are you working with employees, or are you working with companies that are looking to hire employees, or both?
Both. So I'll back up a little bit. So again, name of the company is the Maxfield Group, located in East Providence. We do have our website, which will be, of course, in the link that you send out. Myself, you can contact, on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. We're always posting jobs. We also have our Maxfield page. The other thing is I am more on the, I guess I'd say, client side. So I'm more of a client partner. So I work with the clients who have the needs, and then we have our team of recruiters who find the talent or build the relationships with the resources looking for work. So if you reach out to me, I can put you in contact with one of our specialized recruiters. Again, that's the beauty of it, is you're working with a specialized recruiter who knows the space. So if you're in the ERP space, I'm going to connect you with one of my colleagues who all they do is recruit in the ERP space. So they're going to learn your background, understand what you're looking for, see what needs we may have, or going back to the slides, proactively present you to clients that use those technologies and may have a need for your skill set.
Fantastic. That was really clear. We had the information on the screen. So yes, please do reach out to Chris Caccia from the Maxfield Group in East Providence to follow up specifically with any particular questions that we don't get to today. So Chris, let me ask you about keywords. So when employees are putting together their resume, stocking them with keywords, when you're posting on LinkedIn and Indeed, how does that work in terms of the algorithms that LinkedIn and Indeed are using? Are they picking up on your keywords, or is the keyword algorithm mostly for a direct employer-employee application process? If you follow my.
So yeah, I think I understand what you're asking. So you're saying when a company puts their out there, say on LinkedIn, right? How is that gonna that algorithm gonna work and get pushed in front of resources with that skill set?
Yeah, so some employers or some folks that we've been in touch with talk about how, they post jobs on LinkedIn, Indeed, Handshake even, and the question is, how are these people like thinking that they're qualified to apply for this job? Like, why, all these sort of off topic type of applications. So how are these how are the algorithms delivering your particular job posting to candidates through the keyword match?
Yep. So I think a lot of that has to do with, there's hashtags, right? LinkedIn's very unique in the fact of, so for me, for instance, if I'm sending out messages to folks on LinkedIn, right? And everything I'm doing is around, I'm just going to use an example, Power BI. For the next few days, all I'm going to see that's going to be pushed in front of me is Power BI resources, right? And that's the algorithms, the searches you're doing. It's going to push what they think you want to see in front of you. As far as jobs go, the jobs that fit, so everything, let me backtrack. Your LinkedIn profile is more important than you realize when you're looking for jobs. And I've done LinkedIn trainings before with individuals, how to make your profile more applicable if you're looking for a job. Because the first thing most people do, and again, maybe some more than others, is go and look at your LinkedIn profile, right? And you'll see some people that it just says their name, maybe a company they work for, and nothing. Those individuals probably aren't seeing jobs that are a good fit for them, right? So the first thing I say to resources or candidates, if they're looking for jobs, your LinkedIn profile needs to be updated. You don't need to put everything in there, but the skill sets you have that are applicable to the jobs you're going to apply to, you need to put in your profile. And what's going to happen with that is LinkedIn's going to pick up on that. So when a company, say the Providence Chamber posts a job, they're looking for, I don't know, a supply chain individual with financials experience, right? If that's in your profile, that job is going to get pushed in front of you and says, you may be interested in this job. So making sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date as far as, where you're working, of course, but skill set wise and any of the buzzwords around that skill set is what you want to do. So those jobs are getting pushed in front of you automatically as companies are posting those profiles. The other thing is, I think on the opposite side is if as an employer, you post that job, it will also push people in front of you and say, hey, you may be interested in reaching out or speaking to this person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got it. So we have a couple of questions that are coming through to us from Facebook. The first is from Jen, and Jen wants to know, how can I help my HR team in hiring, and when would I need to bring in an outside firm like yourself?
Good question. So I think to help your HR team, if you're a hiring manager, is sit down with them, right? Get on the same page and say, hey, here's what we're looking for. Maybe this is if we get the purple squirrel, this is what we want, but here's where we're willing to budge on the skill set. Maybe they don't need to have all 10 skill sets. Maybe we'll be okay with seven of the skill sets, and we can train them up on the others. To get individuals that have every skill set in a company can sometimes be difficult, right? And what was the second piece of that? I'm sorry.
When do I need to bring in an outside firm like yourself? So, a
Yep.
timing question.
Yeah. And I think that's dependent on the company. And like I said before, we have a saying in the staffing industry that time kills all deals, right? So it comes back to, if you have an offer out for somebody and you're waiting and you lose them, how important is that job? So it all comes down to, what's the skill you're looking for? Okay. Is it a specialized skill? If it's a specialized skill, is when I say you should bring in a firm like ours, right? You can hire there's a million staffing firms out there, right? I mean, you could literally all day go through staffing firms, but are they specialized? Do they understand the skill set? And I can bring it back to the analytics space. The difference is, if you have a generalist, and again, this isn't knocking any other firms, but a generalist firm, they don't see as many analytics roles as my team will. So when you're getting into that analytics space, it does get very technical. And again, we're not very technical individuals, but we understand when somebody can do the job, and how they explain it to us is how we know if they're a fit for that job. Of course, we do references and all that as well. But if you were to reach out to us and say, hey, we need a Power BI individual that can do DAX and have SQL experience as well, right? We have a network of those folks we've been speaking to day in and day out for 3 years. We could probably deliver somebody in 48 to 72 hours, depending on the rarity of the skill set, as opposed to, if you give it to a generalist firm, they're going to sit down, they're going to be like, all right, I got to figure out what this job is. What's this skill set? They're probably going to talk to about 20 to 30 individuals before they understand what they're really looking for. And those individuals are going to pretty much tell them what they're looking for. So it comes down to timing. How bad do you need to fill the role? How fast? And a specialized firm is really, you realize, comes into play. And when you have a company that has used a specialized firm and understands the value, usually what happens is they don't reach out to anyone else when they have those roles, because of the delivery, right? Instead of sending 100 resumes hoping one sticks, we're going to send you 2 to 3. All will be a fit from a skill set perspective. Now you just need to pick from a cultural perspective which person you want.
Mentioning what you talked about earlier in your deck, you emphasize the importance about being really specific in your job description about what you actually are looking for. And also, what I found compelling was the notion of overlapping skill sets. Don't do that. Really try to be very discreet about what you're looking for. So, Jen, I think that sort of dovetails with what you're saying and your question as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Our next question is from Donnie, and he wants to know, how does job tenure play a part in the hiring process in today's world? And is it still encouraged to stay with an employer long term? So interesting question there from Donnie. What do you say to that, Chris?
So it's very interesting, and I think that's changed a lot through COVID. I'll be honest. Before, we'd work with companies who, tenure was something that a lot of companies pitched. Well, we have individuals, you get your job here, you start here, you're retiring here, right? 20 years, 30 years. Over COVID, that has really changed a lot. And I'm not sure if it has to do with opportunity, but you have to look at it and again, I'm going to talk about the IT or analytics space. You have to look at it from a term of advancement, right? So if you're a company where, managers, directors have been there 20 to 30 years, and you're a newer individual coming in, stepping in the door, maybe you're right out of college, a couple of years experience, your goal is always to advance your skill set. In IT, I'll be honest, when I look at somebody's resume, I really don't worry about what you did 10 years ago. It's not applicable to today. Technology evolves so fast. So if you go into a company that hasn't implemented new tools, is doing advancing their technology, you're kind of going to end up stagnant, right? And I see this a lot with companies who have, individuals have been there 20 or 30 years, all of a sudden they have a big layoff. These individuals are getting paid, say, $200,000 a year, and they go, well, I want 200,000 or more. And I say, that's great. Your skill set doesn't command that in today's market. So yes, you were with your company, you were advancing, you were getting bonuses and increases. At some point, your company was like, they're costing us a lot of money, whatever the reason may be. Say you get laid off, say something happens. You're now going to come into a salary that there's individuals out there that have been doing these latest and greatest tools, and they're cheaper, right? And I don't want to use the word cheaper. They're less salary. So tenure is important, I think, for companies if that's what they pitch and they're always advancing, because of course everybody wants to be with one company where they can be happy with and don't have to worry about looking for a job. But what I'm seeing in today's market is that the day of individuals getting a job with a company and retiring with that company are very rare. You're seeing individuals stay with companies for 2, maybe 3 years. Money, remember the two things I spoke about, individuals are title driven or money driven. If they're sitting in a role where they've been an analyst for the last 3 years and they don't see an opportunity to move up, or a company opens a new role above them and they don't give a chance for internal promotion, they're not going to stick around, right? And I mean, it's I hate to use the word common sense, but it brushes people the wrong way. Employers that have been there working hard and they're not given the opportunity. The companies that give the opportunities, or management really works with them and wants to advance them in their career, are the ones that have more tenure, I would say. So it does play a role. It's not the way it used to be. I would say the last, 3-4 years, what I've seen is it has changed a lot. And you're seeing individuals 2-3 years, they're looking for their next role.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting, because the conventional wisdom, when you looked at someone's resume, was, oh, they skipped around a lot,
Exactly.
but
That's a conversation that we have with clients. So again, I've worked with a lot of them where they're like, well, this person looks like they've jumped around, or this person hasn't been at a place longer than this. And you have to tell them, hey, listen, it's not like that anymore. It's great if it is, but then here's the other issue. And I touched on this earlier. They were with that company for 15 years and they're still using, and IT folks out there might know this. They're still using like COBOL from back in the day, right? Where the newest skill set is Power BI. So are you willing to train them up? Or where are you willing to, again, I use the word flex a lot. Where are you willing to flex on that? But that's one of the big issues we see is it has changed a lot. And the companies that open their mind a little bit more to it and aren't stuck on the how many years you've been at a company. Because again, look at it this way too. Things change in companies. As fast as things move on the IT side and companies are advancing and putting in new stuff, companies change a lot. And maybe new management came in, they don't like the way it was after a couple of years, right? There's a lot of different things that come into play. And I think hiring managers need to be more open to that fact instead of closed-minded to just looking at somebody's resume and saying, well, you were only here for 3 years or 2 years. I guess if it gets down to somebody's at a company for 6 months at a time, okay, it's a little bit of a red flag, but you kind of really got to look at it abstractly and kind of ask the questions. Hey, why did you leave? What was your reason? Were you looking for more advancement? Can we offer that to you?
Fantastic. We have another question coming in from Caroline, and this is more of a resource business development question. Obviously, Caroline is very impressed with your presentation today, and she wants to know, do you have recommendations for firms like yours, like the Maxfield Group, or do you represent other industries like hospitality, hotels and restaurants? So I know we're talking about enterprise solutions and IT. So I think Carolyn is wondering, how would somebody tap into a resource like yours, if not in the enterprise space?
Okay. So if you're specifically, so industry wise, I mean, we do IT across all industries. So if she's talking from an IT perspective, we're across all industries. If it comes to, hey, I'm looking for a job in the hospitality or in that industry, hotels, restaurants, there are other firms out there that do specialize in that. Personally, I don't know of any. If you were to do a quick search, again, LinkedIn, anything like that, you'll see the same firms that do post the same things over and over again. For that kind of thing, I'll be honest, I feel like that's more of a generalist staffing firm. They'll get different things like that. In the Rhode Island space, again, I came from the hospitality industry years ago. I actually had individuals reaching out to me like a month ago asking for help if I could help them because they knew I did staffing. If I could help them in the hospitality space, that's another space. They are struggling extremely bad finding folks, and they're paying very well. So I would say first approach is look for somebody specialized who can help you and has those relationships, right? It's a relationship driven business. If they know all the hotels, restaurants and stuff like that are hiring, that's probably your best bet to go. Other than that, I would go and open it up to your network. And again, LinkedIn is an amazing tool. And there's plenty of jobs on LinkedIn, not just in the IT space.
Perfect. Hope that answers your question. Caroline, I know it's a very challenging situation for employers in the hospitality space and restaurants. You hear stories about restaurants having, instead of being open 7 or 6 days a week, they're having to close 2 or 3 days because they can't get enough help, which begs the question of like, where is everybody? And the answer is, very much you described today, Chris. It depends. Depends what kind of industry you're talking about, the job. We get all that. But I'm wondering, are the jobs of today fundamentally more difficult? Are they jobs that are more specialized? Are they harder? Is there less of a generalist role for employees, and it's really, really, super niched? And is that why there's a mismatch where you can't, there are plenty of jobs. You said it earlier. There are plenty of jobs, but we just don't have the people to fill them. And is it because the jobs themselves are harder?
I would say, and again, speaking from the IT space, extremely niched, right? So when you're looking for these skills, and it's no fault of the companies, but they're looking for something very specific to fill a specific role. So they have a team. Some folks do development. Some folks may, pull from a data warehouse. Some may be doing architecture, but they need somebody to do, it's called ETL, extract, transfer, load. And they've changed it now to ELT. But so they want somebody who can do specifically that skill. And then within that skill of ETL, it's specific to the tools they're using. So now not only were you specific, hey, I need somebody who can do specifically this, they also need to work with these specific tools. So that's one of the issues. Like you said, I think it is more niche. Companies are looking for the specific, I don't want to say the needle in the haystack, but they want the home run, right? The home run of this is the person, this is going to do the job. You don't see so much in the IT space because it's so big, someone who's, I guess I call them a utility player. Sometimes you do. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, we need somebody who can do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, maybe somebody who's touched a little bit of everything. You do get those here and there, not as much. And that may be because when companies reach out to us, it is for that specific niche skill set. So they're shorthanded on a project, or they lost, somebody went out on maternity leave for 4 months and they're like, hey, we need somebody to come fill this role. Okay, well, we can find you somebody. But now the other piece you look into is that individual's been at the company for 6 years. They picked up multiple tools working at that one company that an individual coming in from the outside probably hasn't touched all those tools. So they gained a skill set that is now hard to replace because they've touched a little bit of everything in the company. Whereas when you're bringing in somebody from the outside, they're a specialist at what they do. So they just do ETL. They're not going to do ETL as well as, a little bit of business analysis and then some finance on the side. That's a very rare thing. So I think to your point, things are a little more niche and specific as opposed to just looking for the in general, hey, let's find somebody who's competent enough to do this job and see if it works.
What does the landscape look like, Chris, for jobs in the sales and business development space that have a data analytics backbone?
Very busy. So on the sales side, and when you say sales, I assume you're saying like software sales. Am I correct?
No, just a company wants business development skill set, and they want to cultivate customers, identify customers in the pipeline using digital tools to find potential customers. What job opportunities exist for people that are looking for that kind of role?
There's a lot of those roles out there, and especially since hiring demands. So the hiring demand as a company's looking to hire so many folks, they may not want to reach out to an agency. A lot of companies don't like to use outside agencies because maybe they've been burnt in the past. They don't understand the value. They haven't had a good specialized firm. So what they're doing is they're going to build an internal team of business development folks. So what we've been seeing is a lot of companies out there, even clients that I work with, who I do fill a lot of roles with, they're hiring very heavily on that business development side. So there are a lot of opportunities. I will say the barrier to entry, I guess is what you want to call it, is pretty low in that space because they usually, depending on, they don't pay the most salary, especially if it's internal. It's decent, but it's not like an agency would do. Basically what you're doing is you're picking up the phone, you're calling, and you're talking to folks and qualifying them. So you don't need to have a crazy degree or anything like that to do it. So there's a lot of folks out there now who's willing to sit at a desk all day, talk to resources, and try to staff those roles. That's, I guess, the other piece. And we run into it ourselves here, right? We're trying to hire folks, and it's very difficult to find people who are driven, who want to work in this industry, or who aren't asking for an extremely high salary to come in and do the job, right? It's hard to sometimes hire folks that are commanding a higher salary that probably I'm making as a senior individual who's been doing this for 8 years, right? It's a very common thing to see. You just can't justify it as a company. But as far as business development, I've probably seen most of the jobs out there that I have seen going through LinkedIn. There's a lot of business development, sales reps, a lot of recruiting jobs out there.
Fantastic. So we only have 2 minutes left, but before we go, one last question, and then I'll give you a chance, Chris, to wrap up and reach out to invite you to let folks know how they can reach out to you. As an employer, when you're listing jobs, what are your thoughts about listing the salary range?
I would advise against it. Okay, and the only reason you can put a range. All right. The only reason I say that is if you're an individual who we deal with it on an everyday basis, right? You called me, say, hey, what are you looking for salary? They go, well, what's it paying? And I say, well, it's based off of experience, right? If you're making, say, $100,000, but I can pay $140,000, and I say, well, it pays 140, what are you going to say? Well, I want 140. What justifies a $40,000 raise? Now, I'm not saying the person's not worth it. Maybe they were underpaid. But what justifies that? Because at the end of the day, our job as an agency or a recruiter is to put you in the best position to be successful. If I present you at $140,000, I may have priced you out because when that manager looks at your skill set and says they're not worth that, you missed an opportunity. Now, at the end of the day, and I say this to everyone I speak to, as an agency on a permanent side, we get paid a percentage of what we get you. So beating you down on rate doesn't benefit us. But at the same point, my job is to put you in the best position to get the job. And by knowing the market and what they pay and honestly what your skill set's worth, nobody's leaving a company for the most part to not get a little more money. 5, 10, 15,000, depending on what it is, definitely. But that's something where, if you put the salary range in there, everyone's going to shoot for the top range, in my opinion. It's just natural to do so. Now, are you pricing yourself out? Some people say, well, I've applied to 100 different companies. I never got one call back. You might need to look at what you're doing in your application process that could be changing that. So I personally am not a fan of doing it. When I work with companies, I always figure out what folks are currently making, where they want to be, and fit them into that position where I think will be the best opportunity to get them the interview.
Okay, so we've reached the top of the hour. Chris, any final concluding thoughts? How do people get in touch with you once again if they have additional questions or want to work with Maxfield Group?
Yeah, if you have any questions, again, you can reach out through our website or on our LinkedIn. My direct email is chris@maxfieldgrp.com. Feel free to shoot me an email and just, say you a follow-up from the Providence Chamber webinar, and I can either have a conversation with you myself or put you in contact with the right individual on my team to talk to. Again, we're more than happy to talk to folks and see what we can help you do in your job searches, or even if you're hiring and having some trouble, feel free to reach out.
Okay. So thank you to Jen and Donnie and Caroline for weighing in with questions. I hope we were able to cover that for you. So again, Laurie White, President of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, episode number 160 of Chamber TV. Special thanks to Chris Caccia from the Maxfield Group. This session has been recorded, and we will be putting it on our various platforms, our website, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. If you want to get back and look any particular resections, that'll be up there for you, and happy to take any questions that you might have going forward. So that's it for today. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Lori.